It has been said that you cannot be what you cannot see. Marian Wright Edelman said that, and we believe she is so true. If you cannot envision yourself in a role, it is impossible to achieve, or certainly much more difficult. So let's talk about women in the old days. Susan B. Anthony, who was clearly a pivotal person in the suffragette movement. At 17, she was collecting petitions for anti-slavery. In 1856, she became the New York Special Agent in the American Anti-Slavery Society. Mary McLeod Bethune, another extraordinary educator and civil rights leader. She founded the National Council of Negro Women and Bethune-Cookman College. Who says women can't do math and science? When you see Marie Curie, go ahead, give her some love. She was a chemist and a physicist, the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, and the only person to win multiple prizes in multiple disciplines. That's a bad girl. And then there's Florence Nightingale. Many people don't know. She was an English social reformer and a statistician and the founder of modern nursing. I think girls can do math and science. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. When you look at these women, Representative Rankin was the first woman elected to Congress in 1916. Please remember that women could not vote until 1920. What? We had some enlightened men at that time. Senator Rebecca Felton, believe it or not, from the great state of Georgia, the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate in 1922. Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American female elected to Congress in 1969, serving 7 terms. Now, Senator Majai Hirano, who was the first Asian American elected to the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate, who took office in 1913. What about the global titans, the women who are in international spaces? We have Eve Perón, who served as First Lady of Argentina from 1946 until her death in 1952. Indira Gandhi, the 3rd Prime Minister of India and the only woman to hold that position. Michelle Bachelet, the President of Chile, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, head of state in Africa, in Liberia. So we shouldn't allow others to limit the perceptions that define us. Sandra Day O'Connor, first Supreme Court Justice, female, appointed there by who? President Ronald Reagan in 1981. Sally Ride, also a physicist and an astronaut, joined NASA in 1978. And Admiral Michelle Howard, just last year, the first 4-star admiral in the United States Navy. And then when you think of corporate titans, we will not be left out in business. This is Girls Helping Girls. Who says we're petty? Anne Mulcahy handed over the reins of Xerox, a Fortune 500, to Ursula Burns in 2009. Madam C.J. Walker, the first self-made millionaire in America. This woman in 1908 started a manufacturing company for a beauty line, had a catalog business. Can you say Mary Kay's forerunner? She was working it. And then we have Mary Barra, the first woman to run an automotive global company. Give her some love. She inherited a mess. She's cleaning it up. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. Eleanor Roosevelt, we know who she was, right? Our most recent rock stars, Malala. Is she not a bad girl? Activist for education, standing up and using her voice. And then there's Monet, the little pitcher in Little League Baseball. Both of their names start with M. Both of them are teenagers. Both of them have been on the covers of magazines, Time and Sports Illustrated, respectively. Can any of us say that? We've all been teenagers, but have we been on the cover of a magazine? That is special. These three women I have shown you here are from Africa, Mexico, and Brazil, respectively. They are all entrepreneurs in a program we call 5 by 20 at the Coca-Cola Company, because we believe that women hold up at least half the sky. Is that true? I frankly think women hold up the entire sky, but no disrespect to the men in the room. We need a few good men always, few good enlightened men to help us make the world turn the right direction. And so Harriet Tubman tells us, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach the stars and to change the world. So will you allow me to talk to these young ladies today about what they're doing in their environments? Will you allow me to do that? Again, that's what we're doing because I've got the mic. So ladies, thank you for being here. Isn't this exciting? Monica, I'm going to start with you. You are in the finance industry. Can you talk a little bit about this math and science thing? Girls are scared about math, and what was your inspiration to go into the field that you're in, and how do we get girls more engaged and women more engaged in finance?
Well, I think something that basically impacts everyone is mentorship and what they see and what they experience in their life. And I am the daughter of a merchant marine ship's captain and an artist. And my dad worked as a ship's captain for 16 years, and we lived on a ship for the first 5 years of my life. And we lived that way until we hit a point where I couldn't even get an education living on a ship. So he changed his line of work completely, and no one would give him a job that paid even half of what he used to make as a ship's captain. So he decided to pave his own way. Again, being new to the country, no one would give him a loan, no one would give us a place to live. And so all of it came back to the strength that comes from having a little bit of savings and being your own boss and deciding, I'm not gonna wait for you to give me a turn, I'm gonna take my own turn. And so—
What? I like it, I like it.
So they started a business, they had no business plan, and over 30 years, a tiny little retail store evolved into a retail chain, which led rise to a wholesaling business, which then led rise to real estate investments and a diversified investment company that made these people who could not find a home millionaires many times over. And when you see that in front of your eyes, you can't help but have those fingerprints just leave an impression over everything. And so my babysitter was their business. And I grew up with the greatest, winning the lottery, really, because I saw the hope right in front of me. No one was going to tell me that you can't do it because I saw these people do it. I saw so many people in my family's community do it. And so that impression has followed me throughout my career. I followed the conventional wisdom, did well in school, went to the Ivy League, but again, never found the inspiration or hope that matched what I saw, just again, by winning the lottery and living this experience. And so I've had the pleasure of being able to work with many entrepreneurs, and I'm finding as I grow older that this is my passion and this is where I want to make a difference.
So experience has been awesome for you, those experiences. And what she didn't tell you is that she's a singer. She sang with John Legend before he was a big deal. I'm just saying, we have multiple dimensions to our lives. Laura, let's talk a little bit about innovation and about technology, because entrepreneurship is a big field that folks want to get into, and innovation and technology is a very cool platform. You're at Pantheon. Help me a little bit with women and innovation and entrepreneurship in technology.
Sure. What I found in getting into this, what we do is we manufacture chemicals, but we're 100% committed to creating sustainable chemistry. The way the chemical world and industry works is dominated by men, has been historically dominated by men. And it really, we actually have the capability as a human race to solve all the problems we have and continue, and not have to continue to poison ourselves. The cycle in which we create chemistry, design chemistry, educate our designers, they put out 10,000 new molecules into the world every year, and we wait until something happens that's bad, and then we argue for 10 years, and then it takes another 10 years to ban something. And that cycle is not sustainable. And I think that You know, what I learned is that transformational change, if you really want to make an impact, you're going to take brand new ideas and from an idea all the way to wide-scale adoption. Because if you don't get wide-scale adoption, you don't really solve the problem. So that is a long view. And I think women tend to be more wired for that long view. And I think that there's a calling, a desperate calling, and I actually am very passionate about it, and I think it's mission critical to the way we conduct commerce in the world, that we have women at the table, at the design table, in science, technology, engineering, and math. The challenge is to attract them, but it's the only way we're going to create solutions, and then understand that there are a lot of things that will prevent wide-scale adoption of a new solution, and just instead of just thinking short-term, in terms of, you know, can we make a return on investment on this and how quickly can we do that? It's what is how do we get wide-scale adoption, and and I think women would be more wired to have that conversation and be patient along the way and understand that laws of inertia and policy and all kinds of things need to be looked at like a big chessboard, and to get that wide-scale adoption so you can actually quantify and measure the impact that the innovation has on a large scale for the human race.
So a holistic approach maybe would make a whole lot of sense. So if we want to be holistic, we want to have everybody at the table, men and women, young girls and young boys. So Claire, if I could turn to you, the Emirates Foundation and your work around youth empowerment. You've worked all over the globe, but you've spent a lot of time from Palestine to Africa working to make sure that people are getting good educations, kids, and they're being empowered. Can you talk a little bit about how closing the gender gap is helpful, not just to girls, but to boys, to business, and to the world?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Emirates Foundation is the national foundation of the UAE, and we work to help young people navigate the 21st century. It's something that I think is increasingly complicated. In the Middle East, you're actually seeing, surprisingly, a growth in the number of women that are attaining very high levels of educational achievement. And there's been significant progress for the Arab world for women in education. However, they still face structural issues which I would argue impact all women, and certainly myself, I've witnessed those in my career. The first is that we are still not acknowledging that having women in the workplace adds value, contributes. There is a very strong business case that has been acknowledged by multiple pieces of research to say those companies who have more women, especially in the C-suite, deliver more value, perform better, have better financials. So not so much about their educational achievements, but really let's get them active in the workspace. And that's a challenge when you see that women are still being paid less than men for the same role. So I think there's really a lot to be done in the Middle East and beyond in terms of understanding that if you leave out 50% of the population from your working space, you are going to struggle to build a sustainable and a viable organization. The second thing I think that is crucial for women, not just in the region but globally, is getting women on boards. You know, we're in the 21st century and we still only have 21 women on the FTSE 500 who are CEOs. I mean, this to me is one way of really solving some of our structural issues around inclusion for women. If women are not senior decision makers, if they are not in politics, if they are not sitting on boards, we're not getting that power of voice. And that's something that in the UAE now we actually have a piece of legislation. Some people are against quotas, but in 2012 it was legislated that all state-owned corporations now must have women on their boards. So there is hope for progress, but more needs to be done. And finally, I would just say the F word. We need to understand that it's okay to be a feminist. Men can be feminists. For too long now, I think young women in particular, we have an example here in the US. Taylor Swift recently said, oh, actually, I am a feminist. Now I know what it means. And David Cameron in the UK said something similar, sadly, even though he's an Oxford-educated prime minister. He said, oh...
He's an enlightened man. We're going to give him love.
He actually said, oh, if you mean by feminism equal rights, yeah, then I am one. And I think it's shocking how we've managed to denigrate this word over the years. Feminism simply means that men and women should have access to equal rights. And I think it's very powerful if we can all call ourselves, we are all feminists.
You go. So that is very helpful. What Laura didn't say, she's our green guru. Claire speaks fluent Arabic and French. Aren't these two awesome? All these women. See, I'm telling you these little tidbits. I want you to understand underneath all this power, there's another dimension. Are you following me? All right, mayor. The youngest mayor in Compton, California ever, just elected. Mayor, this is a natural transition in terms of inclusion and the work that you've done in Compton. You're in the public sector. Talk a little bit about running your city and how we can get more women engaged in the political process. We know, I'm a recovering public servant, so I understand. Did y'all catch that? Recovering, you never quite get it out of your system. Yes. So help us understand, how do we get more women, they are at least 50% of the electorate, how do we get more women engaged in public service, interested in public policy, and understanding how to connect all these dots that Claire and Monica and Laura have already talked about?
I think everything that was discussed today on the stage is really interconnected. Just to give a little bit of context into my background, I was raised by a strong single mother with a twin brother, and I was raised that I can do everything that he can do and sometimes better. And so my mother would, and I proved it on several occasions if he's watching, but my mother in the 3rd grade, she says, you know, you guys are going to forego your Saturday morning cartoons to expand your mind. And so she enrolled us in a science, technology, engineering, and math program with Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is a subsidiary of Caltech. And so for 3 hours, for several years, I learned how to build computers. I learned electronic engineering, and I was introduced to a whole new world of diodes and transistors and resistors. And I learned how to do calculus in the 3rd grade. And what that did for me was expand my mind. It gave me an amazing amount of self-confidence and self-esteem. And it also destroyed paradigms that girls couldn't do math, or they weren't great at science. And it really provided the first time in my life that I had been at an equal playing field with every single ethnicity, regardless of your background. If you had 2 parents, if you had 1, everything was equal. And so I transitioned that, and as I went into college, I was pre-electrical engineering. And I changed my major to policy planning and development because I was interested in why did people live certain ways? Why did our built environment develop the way that it did, and really what was the core root of disparities? And so I took that education and my experience, and as I started my career, I started out in economic development. I was always the only woman at the boardroom. I was the youngest, and every single meeting I had an opportunity to destroy paradigms. And so as I transitioned my work into working with young people, my husband and I, we've always mentored kids ever since we were in college, and I created youth empowerment programs. We created programs called Plan B, which really introduces kids to that your education is not your second option, it's your first option. And sadly, that's really the things that we're coming up against, especially in communities of color. And then we also created, as mayor, empowerment programs. I bring all types of amazing people and ordinary people together that can mentor, that have programs, and really provide exposure, opportunity, and expand the mindsets of young people. And it's truly about our paradigms. And I think that as being a young woman mayor, every time I speak to a young lady, that just empowers her. And so we have so much power as just being, you know, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a physicist or a CEO, you have the opportunity to speak life into the lives of young people, young women, and also to change their limit of what's their perception of what their limitations are. And so it really is on us. It takes, it's an all hands on deck approach. I bring my business community, corporate sponsors, nonprofits, the politicians, everyone, churches, everyone comes together, and we all have a strategic plan of what we're going to do in our community. I group people together, we share resources, and we make it happen.
That is outstanding. So we've got every sector represented here. I left business for last, not because it's not important, Kat, because we certainly want to hear about it, but we want to save the sweet treats for last. You're the dessert lady. You're Cinnabon. Kat actually runs Cinnabon. She is now the president, having been appointed to that post in 2011, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
So she's running a P&L, folks. She's running a P&L. Talk a little bit about business and the glass ceiling for women, because the same could be true in innovation, in technology, where the innovative space is, or in finance, or in youth empowerment. But talk a little bit about business, and you were formerly at Hooters, right? Mm-hmm. And you are now at Cinnabon. So talk a little bit about the space you're in. How do we get women on the fast track to break through that glass ceiling? You've done it.
I think the way we get women on the fast track is first using the foundation of what every one of these women have said up here. You've heard common themes about the interconnectedness of the public sector, the private sector, allowing women to learn strength from even their challenging circumstances. I too, I mean, I'm telling you, you are my sister from another mister, because our life is so similar. Raised by a single parent, pre-engineering student, I dropped out of college to pursue an opportunity to go open restaurants all over the world when I was 19. And that led to a career I could not have expected. And there are these arms that young women need to reach out to them from nonprofits, from their community, from their friends. Now, they need to be strong enough and confident enough to reach their arms out too, to believe that they will be connected to something and that there's something even better that lies beyond the next day, the next opportunity, the next life. And I think a lot about the stories I've just heard and my own. And part of what allows that to occur is a legacy of women who are willing to tell their stories. I always say this when young women come up to me and say, "How did you do it?" Then I'll turn right back to them and say, "Tell me about how you grew up." And there's something really special about what they've done. And I'll ask them, "Why do you think that story is not powerful in and of itself? And don't you realize that that could inspire someone else?" Someone told me that when I was really young. And so I started telling my story. And I started sharing that I grew up with an alcoholic father and a single parent, and I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and my mom fed us on a food budget of $10 a week for 3 years. And when I shared that story, then others would then share their story. And then there's this liberation of, I don't have to hide behind how I've grown up or where I come from. And I believe that part of what allows women to break the glass ceiling and continue to elevate themselves and therefore have the confidence to elevate others is by following the advice that my mom writes on my birthday card every single year, which is, don't you ever forget where you came from, but don't you dare let it solely define you. And that, truly, you know, that is not only the key for personal journey, constant self-renewal, but also building enormous enterprises. You have to innovate, evolve a company, a product, a business model, and yourself as a leader. And the only way you can do that is by what you started off with, the power of seeing what's possible, believing that there is enough evidence that you could achieve those things, and that's a big leap to obtain. And then from that point, leveraging the village that is around you. I dropped out of college, the daughter of an alcoholic father and a single parent, and I worked at Hooters my whole life. My resume was not stellar. But
I don't know, we all eat the chicken wings from Hooters.
that's right.
Come on.
But you know what? I went to nonprofits and got 30-day certifications. I went to immersive programs. I volunteered in my company to learn new things. I went to the Women's Food Service Forum and saw an audience like this of so many women. I'd never seen that many women in my life, and I'd never seen that many women in suits. And I didn't know that was possible for me until that moment. So it was a journey with every single constituent in my community that allowed me to see what was possible, have the courage and the relationships to take risks. And I think that is the only thing that will expedite the breaking of the glass ceiling, the elevation of women, getting more women on boards, allowing them to see that public service is a way to lead and create a better future for others, and that they can build companies and industries in a totally different way than what has been done before. But it starts by what you said at the beginning, seeing what's possible.
You cannot be what you cannot see. So let me go back to ask each one of you whether the person was in sandals, sneakers, or stilettos. Who was your inspiration or your mentor outside of your parents? Outside of your parents. Is there anyone or anything that was your inspiration or that gives you confidence to go do anything that you're doing now? Mayor, I'm going to start with you.
I get asked that question all the time, and I can say that the biggest influence that really was imparted on my life was my mother really ingraining in me that I can do anything, and I believed it. And I think that sometimes we expect that a mentor or a celebrity or some person that we hardly even know should have more influence on our children than the people that actually raised them. But my mother, she was the most influential person in my life, and she ingrained in me that if I set goals and if I sacrifice and if I made a plan, then I can achieve anything on this planet. And I took that with me every single place that I've gone, and I truly believe that. And I think that we have a responsibility to connect with one another and to help one another. And as I wrap up, I've been to so many women's leadership forums and groups and all these great events, But the biggest thing that I always hear, and it's the common thread to the fabric, is that, well, men won't give women a seat at the table. And my sole question and my sole response is always, well, why are we waiting for men to give us a seat at the table? Why can't we build our own table? And it's not to say that we won't work with men, and it's not to say that we can't collaborate and that we don't create a beautiful mix together, because we do. But if one opportunity closes, make a new one. And we have to make our own opportunities. We can't wait for them to just happen, because they don't.
Laura, what about you?
Well, I also had, my mother is probably, I'm listening to you. I mean, I was single mother. She raised us for a long time and was very brave to get out of the situations that she did. And also just always kind of reminded me that possibility, you know, seeing possibility was the most important thing. I do think there were many other influential people along my journey that I would say had more sandals on than stilettos, that kind of had this, it's a woman's time kind of attitude. It's absolutely necessary that everybody on this planet realizes that it's a woman's time. There's, you know, over 50% of the population, and yet we have so many seats at the table. And there are lots of reasons why there are not women at the table. Some that have to do with them not being born yet, all the way to, you know, poverty and health issues, to women opting out of the business world or not believing that they can make a big difference. But I think it's time that, you know, the people who really hammered it in me, that it's a woman's time. You have to fight for it. It's your responsibility as a woman to fight to let everybody, all women know that it's their responsibility to step up and be at the table, not sit back and wait for something else to change, for them to be able to get there by some other means. So that's kind of...
That makes sense. Claire?
Well, I would say also reiterate that my parents always told me I don't ever remember being told you can't be something or you can't do that because you're a girl. And they've always been amazingly supportive for me when I said I want to go and live in the Middle East and bring peace to the Middle East at the age of 20 or something, you know, and I said I'm going to go and live in Palestine. Nobody said, whoa, hang on. They supported me the whole way, so I think that's hugely important when you have parents who empower you as a woman, who say be whoever you want to be, it doesn't matter about your gender. But then, having spent the last 20 years in the Middle East, living in the Arab world, I'm hugely inspired by Arab women, because they have an even more difficult burden than women elsewhere in the world, where you have a cultural propensity to not have women in the workplace. There is in fact, the Middle East has the lowest level of female labor force participation in the world. Right. So it's very difficult for women in the Arab world not only to access the employment market, but just to access the public sphere, to be out there. So when women in the Middle East succeed and get jobs as CEO, it's a much harder journey than elsewhere. And I think that what we're seeing now in the region, where in some parts of the Gulf, you're actually getting a very significant number of women in senior C-suite roles or as CEOs, it's hugely powerful. I mean, a lot of research shows that you actually, it goes back to John's 5% ruling, that you don't need to have you know, hundreds of women around you. You just need one. And for Arab women, I see that all the time. They see one woman in a powerful job, in a powerful role. We have one of our board members. She's a Minister of International Development in the UAE, one of the first ministers in the Middle East. And just the fact that she's there, successful, that's enough for other young women to see that they can achieve. And also, it's so important having women in the workplace, because it breaks down conservative values. I think even in the US, you see that the more and more women came active in the labor force, the less conservative values there were around women having a public role, having activity in the public sphere. So I think, you know, hats off to Arab women in the region, because they are making progress despite very difficult circumstances, and still a huge aversion, a cultural aversion and a social aversion that many of them still talk about, to them actually being active in the labor force.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Monica?
I would also say, starting with my father, because he was just so stubborn to not listen to the people that told him he couldn't do it. He just had that belief and that persistence. And then from there, it would be hearing about the stories of people like Sam Walton. Like when my father could actually spend some time with me and he was not with his business, he would read me articles from Forbes, and that was inspiring. And it was
wait.
I was 7.
Your daddy was reading you articles from Forbes.
Yes.
Okay, that's the little engine that could. All right.
Yes, and so again, it was just these people who, again, had no business being as successful as they became because they didn't have the education, they didn't have the silver spoon, but just made it. They climbed their way. I mean, that is the source of inspiration. People like Warren Buffett, who just, they're good at one thing, and they just do that thing, and life comes to them. Oprah, in the same way, just this inspiring woman who is just who she is. And I think every single person here is good at something, and it's your life's work to tap into that. And that's when you're serving God, that's when you're serving society, is just bringing in that goodness within you. And so just blocking out that conditioning, all of these people who were able to rise, that was my source of inspiration.
That's fantastic. Kat.
Of course, my mother in a very forward way of being my mentor, but the others have been probably more sandals. The people I've worked with in Rwanda and Ethiopia, doing humanitarian work for the last 8 years, and I have learned that one step in empowerment and accomplishment is having a seat at the table or building your own table. I've also learned, don't you dare confuse having a seat with having a voice. And you can, you can get a seat at a table. I've been the token woman. I've been the token young one or token entrepreneur. And if you don't really have a voice, you're just wasting a seat. And so the key is find ways, focus on ways to have a voice, and then people will beg you to come sit in a seat.
That's excellent. So let me flip the script a little bit, because all of you all do work in your communities. You have certain passions, things you're interested in. I know, Monica, you're already working with Project 5117, for example. So if each of you could talk a little bit about the passion. I know, Kat, you do homelessness and hunger. Those are the things you fight. Mayor, I know a little bit. But let's tell our audience a little bit about why you think that's what you do, why you think it's important in conjunction with your regular work every day. Claire, you start.
Well, my regular work is very much, of course, being in the community, and my day job has become my life as well. I'm fascinated about young people. I think young people in 21st century are facing massive challenges that we didn't in the last century and earlier generations. We live in a highly connected, highly complex world, and we are seeing a lot of dysfunctional behavior from young people because they're overwhelmed by the choices they have, this digital revolution that is happening in their lives. And so I think it's hugely important that we support young people, and particularly, of course, young women. So at Emirates Foundation, we have programs around mentoring, and increasingly I realize that mentoring is absolutely the key way to build confidence amongst young people. Too often now we're seeing young people who are disenfranchised, disempowered, overwhelmed, even graduates, even well-educated young people, and particularly women. So I think it's hugely important. Two things. One is the mentoring, which we already do at Emirates Foundation, but also the financial literacy program we have. And indeed, that's why we're here today, because we work closely with Operation Hope. But if young people cannot manage their personal finances, if they do not understand how to access banking products, if they don't know the difference between an asset and a liability, they are going to struggle in this complex world with such a fast speed of change and so many economic challenges. And I think that platforms like this are beyond critical. If we cannot help young people to understand the way that works from an economic and a financial perspective, we are going to face huge challenges beyond what we already have.
Don't have any passion around that, do you, Claire? Monica, thank you.
You are your own biggest investor in life, but the stick in that is that most people are so intimidated by money. And why wouldn't we be intimidated by money? No one really teaches us the language of money. If you didn't learn how to drive, you'd be intimidated by driving. If you didn't learn how to read, you'd be intimidated by reading. And so if you are your own greatest investor in life, if you're the one who's going to give yourself the chances, you're going to push through those doors, you need to learn the language of money. And it can be very intimidating. And one thing that I've been told is that I'm able to take complex ideas and make them simple. And so I raise my hand and say, I can help with this. And so that is why I spend time focused on financial literacy. And that is why I spend time focused on the role between financial literacy and savings and entrepreneurship. Because again, a lot of people believe that there's a VC or an angel investor that's going to swoop in and invest in my idea and make me this huge success. 0.5% of companies actually get money that way. The bulk of money to start companies comes from your savings and the savings of friends and family. And we've seen that savings rate decline for 30 years. We've also seen startup activity decline. We've also seen job opportunities decline. They're all interrelated. So by helping you be less intimidated by money, you can be your own biggest investor in life. You can create jobs and you can help others. That seems like a good cause to me.
Good advice from you and from Claire. Kat, what about you?
My Twitter handle says conscious, connected, creative, community building capitalist. Wow. And that sort of sums it up. You know, while I was a leader.
Say that again, Kat. It sounds like the 5 C's of the diamond.
That's right. Conscious, connected, creative, community building capitalist. Go to Twitter, Kat Cole ATL. Love to connect with you there. And you know, it's funny, I remember speaking to a group of conscious capitalist CEOs, and I was a vice president at Hooters at the time. And I stayed at Hooters for 15 years, started when I was 17 and left to come run Cinnabon. And I remember them pulling me off to the side, and even in the introduction saying, what is she doing talking to us? And my whole life, look at it however you want, I've either been a walking conflict of interest in the way I spend my time, or someone who seeks great balance in the world. And so I was a leader at Hooters, but I also led women's organizations the entire time I was there. I am the president of one of the most indulgent sweet treat companies in the world that does business in 56 countries with 1.3 billion in consumer product revenues. But I spend my personal time with health organizations, the school nutrition associations to help healthy foods be brought to kids. See what I'm saying? And I remember someone saying, how can you do that? You're a hypocrite. And I said, no, in fact, I am what I like to call a bridge person. If the only people who fight for a cause are the extremists, the extreme capitalists, the extreme indulgers, the extreme not-for-profits, we will never bring the world together. But if you have people who can speak both languages, and to say, I can connect with this world, but I value and appreciate this world, and I am on the journey. I'm on a journey, and I might not be where you want me to be. I might be farther along than you want me to be, but what's most important about my journey is that I'm bringing others along with me. And so that's what drives me, spending time in other countries and nonprofits.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you. Asia.
I spend time building people. I just believe if you have strong people, you'll have strong families have strong neighborhoods build strong cities. And so I do empowerment programs, from empowerment programs for gang members who've recently had a truce in our community. We do business expansion to help local businesses expand their capital and their reach and their exposure. We also do empowerment for young people. So we have a youth empowerment program and we teach them to be leaders, and we challenge them to go from being angry to be, in order to transform into actually mobilizing and creating policies and programs. We also have a new initiative that's launching next month called Girls Fly. And it's an amazing, amazing initiative that is basically an exposure experience, and it provides young girls with exposure to every single field that they can ever dream of, and it actually helps them to connect with people that do what they dream of, and it gives them a pathway to success. We also have Operation Hope. They have invested Operation Hope's Business in a Box model. So we have kids building businesses in the city of Compton, and I think that once you can assign what's valuable to you from your time, from your money, it can help you shape and mold your life's decisions and your choices. And so we have truly an array of great things that we do and that we really focus on, and I spend my time building from the ground up.
Terrific. I'm gonna have to come visit you in Compton. Laura, wrap us up.
I want to build on what you said a little bit. I'm really passionate about changing the conversation about capitalism and the way we conduct commerce. And I was an elementary school teacher, so I'm that angry activist. If I were going to go back 20, I was a tree hugger, wearing Kill Corporate America t-shirts, and now being where I am today is just, you know.
Well, you had sandals and sneakers.
Yeah. And I do think the way capitalism is practiced today does have some fundamental flaws, one of them being that it's not necessarily stakeholder oriented from a policy. Being a business to maximize shareholder value has been the soundbite for so long. So what I'm really passionate about is advocating for the stakeholder model, which all stakeholders that are involved in the business matter. And also, every business has a footprint which creates negative externalities that they don't have to absorb the cost for. So they can make widgets and sell them, and everybody's happy with the transaction except the people on the other side of the fence that got poisoned, right, that are invisible to the transaction. So I think that, you know, if companies could be rewired to say, yes, own the fact that they have negative externalities, and go out and look for them. And they'll probably be pretty horrified when they do look for them. And be transparent about it. And they can't fix everything at once, but you don't want to be overwhelmed and be frozen either. All you can do is to commit to better. And I think creating a movement, changing the vernacular where business can be a force for good. And in fact, I've completely transformed now where I feel that the for-profit platform is probably the most powerful platform for transformation, and it does give us the megaphone to do the bigger things. But you need that economic engine to keep things moving and keep doing good work.
This is true. So let me just say we started this session by looking back historically at women who did not have 1/10 of the resources that we have today. And clearly they left indelible fingerprints on their lives, their families' lives, their communities, and arguably the world. I would submit to you that these women are doing exactly the same thing, and they have offered us some very good counsel, some very good roadmaps, and some wayfinders for navigating the future. So the question I invite, encourage, and implore you to entertain: what will you do? How will you do you, affecting your community, your country, and arguably the world? Please give my panel some love for the wonderful comments that they made today. Ladies?